What would you do if you were bullied every single day, knowing that no one would stand up for you? How long could you endure humiliation before you finally decided to fight back? Elijah Hayes had spent years surviving in silence, until one brutal attack changed everything. With his father, a former Navy SEAL, training him, Elijah prepared not just to fight, but to reclaim his dignity. But would that be enough to stop the powerful Whitaker family? Stay until the end to see how this battle unfolds, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories. The morning air was crisp as Elijah Hayes stepped off the bus in front of Westbridge High School. The red bricked building stood tall against the skyline of Brooksville, Texas, its doors welcoming students into another day of lessons, friendships, and for some, torment. For Elijah, it was just another battlefield. As he walked through the hallways, students moved in groups, chatting about their weekend plans, upcoming tests, and sports games. Elijah kept his head down, his grip tightening around the straps of his backpack as he maneuvered through the sea of students. It wasn't long before the all-too-familiar feeling of unease settled in his stomach, the kind that came from knowing his presence had been noticed by the wrong person. A sharp shove from behind sent him stumbling forward. His books slipped from his grasp, hitting the floor with a loud thud. The hallway fell silent just for a moment as heads turned toward the source of the commotion. "Watch where you're going, Hayes," a smug voice taunted. Elijah clenched his jaw before looking up. Logan Whitaker stood before him, flanked by his usual entourage, 3 boys who followed him like shadows. Logan was everything Elijah wasn't: privileged, untouchable, feared. The son of William Whitaker, one of the most powerful businessmen in town, Logan had spent years crafting his reputation as Westbridge High's undisputed tyrant. But it wasn't just violence that made him dangerous. Logan was calculated, cruel in ways that didn't always leave bruises. He spread rumors that isolated Elijah from his classmates. He stole his assignments, claiming them as his own. He made sure that, no matter what Elijah did, he would always be seen as less. The students who surrounded them exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered, others quickly walked away, pretending not to see. Elijah had learned that no one would help him. He bent down to retrieve his books, his fingers wrapping around the edges of his notebook. Before he could stand, Logan kicked one of the books further down the hall, laughing as it slid across the floor. "Come on, man, pick it up," Logan sneered. "You're used to cleaning up after me, aren't you?" Elijah took a deep breath, forcing his emotions into silence. This wasn't new, it wouldn't be the last time. He needed to keep his head down to endure because fighting back wouldn't change anything. With measured patience, he picked up his books and stood. He could feel Logan's eyes on him, waiting for a reaction. He refused to give him one. Logan's smirk faltered just for a moment before he shoved past Elijah, his friends following close behind, still laughing. The moment passed, the hallway returning to its usual rhythm. But Elijah knew better. This wasn't over. It never was. He just had to survive it. The day had been long, and Elijah Hayes had done what he always did: endured. He had ignored the whispers in the hallways, the cruel laughs, and the subtle smirks that followed him wherever he went. He had swallowed his frustration, convincing himself that as long as he kept his head down, the storm would eventually pass. But today, Logan Whitaker wasn't satisfied with whispers and humiliation. It happened after school in the parking lot when most students had already left. Elijah had been gathering his things from his locker when he felt it, a presence behind him. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "Heard you've been getting bold lately, Hayes." Logan's voice was casual, but there was a sharp edge beneath it. Elijah said nothing. He kept his head down, willing himself to walk away. But Logan wasn't interested in letting him go. The first shove sent Elijah crashing into the lockers, pain radiating across his back. The second one knocked his bag from his shoulder, spilling his books across the pavement. And then came the first punch. It landed clean across his jaw, the impact sending a shockwave of pain through his skull. Elijah staggered, catching himself before he hit the ground. A chorus of mocking laughter rang in his ears, Logan's friends watching, entertained. Then came the next blow, and the next. Elijah barely registered the kicks to his ribs, the sharp crack of his body hitting the pavement. He didn't fight back. He couldn't. By the time Logan was done, Elijah was curled on the cold concrete, gasping for breath, his vision blurred with pain. "Stay in your place, Hayes," Logan sneered before walking away as if nothing had happened. The walk home felt endless. Every step sent a fresh wave of pain through his body, but the ache in his chest, the humiliation, was worse. When he stepped inside the house, the familiar scent of dinner in the air, he hoped, prayed that he could make it to his room before his father saw him. But Nathan Hayes had always been observant. The former Navy SEAL had spent years training men to recognize weakness, to spot the signs of pain buried beneath silence. And tonight, as his eyes settled on his son's bruised face, his split lip, and the way he winced with every movement, he knew. Nathan's expression remained unreadable, but Elijah saw it, the shift in his father's posture, the way his jaw tightened, the cold calculation in his eyes. Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Then finally Nathan spoke. "Who did this to you?" Elijah hesitated. He had spent years keeping this buried, telling himself it was better that way. But tonight he couldn't lie. "Logan Whitaker." His voice was quiet. Nathan exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled, as if reining in something dark, something dangerous. Then he nodded just once. "No more." The words were soft but absolute. Elijah frowned. "What do you mean?" Nathan stepped forward, his gaze steady. "I'm going to teach you how to fight." And for the first time in his life, Elijah felt something new, hope. The next morning, Elijah Hayes woke up to soreness that ran deep in his bones. His ribs ached with every breath, his jaw still throbbed from Logan Whitaker's punches, and every muscle in his body protested as he sat up in bed. He had barely gotten through the night, but even as exhaustion clung to him, his father's words echoed in his mind. "I'm going to teach you how to fight." He hadn't known what to expect. Maybe a few pointers, maybe a talk about standing his ground. He should have known better. Nathan Hayes wasn't just any father, he was a former Navy SEAL, and SEALs didn't train for survival. They trained for domination. The sun was barely rising when Nathan shook him awake. "Get up." Elijah groaned, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "It's 6 in the morning." Nathan didn't waver. "You want to learn how to fight? You start now. Get dressed." Minutes later, Elijah stood outside in the cool morning air, his father beside him, dressed in running gear. "Run," Nathan said simply, his arms crossed. Elijah blinked. "Where?" Nathan tilted his head toward the empty road stretching ahead of them. "Until I say stop." At first, Elijah kept a steady pace. He had never been a runner, but he figured it wouldn't be too bad. 15 minutes later, his lungs were burning. The pavement seemed endless, his legs heavy, his breath ragged. Every muscle screamed for him to stop, but when he glanced back, Nathan was right behind him, jogging effortlessly. "You done?" Nathan called. Elijah swallowed hard, shaking his head. Nathan nodded. "Good, keep going." By the time they finished, Elijah collapsed onto the grass, gasping for air. His father didn't look impressed. "If you don't have stamina, it doesn't matter how strong you are. The first person to run out of energy loses." That was lesson 1. The garage had been cleared out, transformed into a makeshift training space. A punching bag hung from the ceiling, weights stacked neatly in the corner, mats covering the concrete floor. Nathan stood in the center, watching as Elijah threw his first punch at the bag. The impact barely made a sound. Nathan shook his head. Again. But this time, don't just throw your fist, put your weight behind it. Elijah adjusted his stance and punched again. Stronger, more controlled. Nathan nodded. Better. For the next 2 hours, he drilled Elijah relentlessly. Jabs, crosses, hooks, each movement corrected, refined, repeated until his arms felt like they would fall off. But the lesson wasn't just about throwing punches. It was about seeing, reading movements, anticipating the next attack before it came. "You think fighting is about swinging first?" Nathan asked as Elijah wiped sweat from his brow. "It's not. It's about control." After the drills, Nathan handed Elijah a wooden practice knife. Elijah frowned. "What's this for?" Nathan's voice was calm. "Defense." He lunged without warning, the blunt edge of his own knife swiping toward Elijah's ribs. Elijah barely dodged, stumbling back, eyes wide. Nathan didn't stop. Every fight starts in the mind before it ever reaches the body. If you panic, you lose. Elijah steadied himself, forcing his breathing to slow. They went again, and again. Every time, Nathan's attacks became more precise, forcing Elijah to react faster, move smarter, stay calm. It wasn't about rage. It was about focus. Hours later, Elijah slumped against the garage wall, completely exhausted. His shirt clung to his skin, soaked with sweat, but for the first time his body felt different. Stronger. Nathan crouched in front of him, his expression unreadable. "We don't fight for revenge, Elijah." His voice was steady, absolute. "We fight to take back control." And as Elijah met his father's gaze, something inside him shifted. He wasn't just learning how to fight, he was learning how to win. The sun hung low over Westbridge High, casting long shadows across the parking lot as students filtered out of the school, their voices blending into a chaotic hum of conversation and laughter. For the past few weeks, Elijah Hayes had waited, watched, trained. He had endured years of torment, but now he was no longer the same boy who walked these halls afraid. He had changed. And today, Logan Whitaker was about to learn that firsthand. Elijah could feel it coming. The weight of stares, the subtle hush that followed him as he moved through the crowd, students knew something was different. Logan knew it too, and then it happened. "Yo, Hayes." The voice cut through the noise. Elijah stopped, turning slowly. Logan Whitaker stood near his car, flanked by his usual crew. But this time, Elijah didn't feel that familiar pit of dread in his stomach. He felt ready. Logan tilted his head, smirking. "Heard you've been acting tough lately. You think lifting a few weights makes you one of us?" Elijah didn't flinch. That reaction alone made Logan's smirk falter. "Let me remind you how things work around here," Logan sneered, stepping closer. His entourage laughed, but there was an edge of uncertainty in their voices. They could sense something was off. Logan reached out to shove him. But this time, Elijah didn't move. Logan frowned, his hand still on Elijah's chest. The crowd around them grew silent, watching, waiting. And then, Logan made his mistake. The punch came fast, reckless, exactly what Elijah had been waiting for. With trained precision, Elijah sidestepped, letting Logan's momentum throw him off balance. Before Logan could recover, Elijah struck, a controlled jab to the ribs, sharp and deliberate. Logan stumbled. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Students leaned in, eyes wide, disbelief flashing across their faces. But Elijah wasn't done. Logan roared in frustration, swinging wildly. Another mistake. Elijah moved smoothly, reading the attack before it even came. He ducked, pivoted, then drove his fist into Logan's jaw, just enough to send him crashing to the pavement. A collective gasp echoed across the lot. Logan Whitaker, the untouchable bully of Westbridge High, was on the ground. Elijah stepped back, heart pounding but breath steady. Logan blinked up at him, stunned, his face red with rage and humiliation. For the first time, he wasn't the one dishing out the punishment. He was the one being laughed at. Students whispered, some chuckled, others outright stared in shock. Logan had always ruled this school with fear, but fear was built on power. And today, Elijah had taken that power back. He didn't need to say a word. The silence, the shift in the air, the way Logan's friends hesitated to help him up, that was enough. For the first time, Logan Whitaker was the one who had lost. The Whitakers had never lost before. Not in Brooksville, Texas. They weren't the kind of people who accepted defeat, especially not at the hands of someone they considered beneath them. So when Logan Whitaker came home that night, his face bruised, his pride shattered, and the weight of public humiliation hanging over him, his father, William Whitaker, saw red. Logan had barely finished his mumbled excuse when William slammed his whiskey glass down on the expensive mahogany desk in his home office. "You're telling me a nobody, Nathan Hayes' son, put you on your ass?" Logan clenched his jaw, staring at the floor. He had never seen his father this angry. William's voice was a low growl, sharp with controlled fury. "This is my town, Logan. Our name means something here. We don't lose." Logan exhaled, humiliated. "What do you want me to do? He's not the same weak kid anymore." William Whitaker leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled as a slow smirk curled at the edges of his lips. "Then we make him weak again." Nathan Hayes knew something was wrong the second he saw Elijah's tense posture at the kitchen table, his phone gripped tightly in his hands. "Dad." Elijah's voice was flat, but there was a storm behind his eyes. He turned the screen toward Nathan. It was an email from Westbridge High School's Board of Education. "Urgent, emergency disciplinary hearing expulsion review for Elijah Hayes." Nathan's eyes narrowed. He knew exactly who was behind this. He took the phone from Elijah, reading the carefully worded lies hidden beneath official-sounding language, accusations of aggression, instigating violence, repeated misconduct. Nathan let out a slow breath. William Whitaker had made his move. Elijah's voice was tight. "They're trying to expel me, over a fight that Logan started." Nathan's expression didn't change, but something cold settled in his eyes. He had seen men like William Whitaker before, powerful, entitled men who bent the system to their will, who crushed people under their influence, who never had to answer for their actions. Nathan set the phone down and met his son's gaze. "They think they can do this to you." His voice was quiet, deliberate. Elijah swallowed hard. "Can they?" Nathan exhaled. "Not if I have anything to say about it." His eyes burned with calm, controlled determination. Whitaker had started a war. Now, Nathan Hayes was going to end it. The Westbridge High boardroom was filled with tense silence. The polished wood table reflected the overhead lights, but all eyes were locked on the confrontation unfolding between William Whitaker and Nathan Hayes. William sat tall, his presence exuding confidence and control, while Logan slumped beside him, his bruises still visible. On the other side of the table, Elijah sat beside his father and their lawyer, Angela Martinez, who was poised and unreadable. The board president cleared his throat. "Mr. Whitaker, since you initiated this hearing, you may begin." William leaned forward, his voice smooth and practiced. "The safety of students is our top priority. Elijah Hayes brutally attacked my son, unprovoked. We must take action to protect others from this kind of violence." Nathan didn't react, letting William spin his web of lies. When he finished, Nathan reached into his pocket and placed his phone on the table. With a single tap, a video began to play. The truth unfolded on screen. The footage showed Logan initiating the fight, throwing the first punch while his friends laughed. Elijah had defended himself with calm, controlled movements, not aggression but skill. Then came the second video. The screen showed William Whitaker pounding on the Hayes front door, his voice filled with rage and threats. A murmur rippled through the boardroom. Some members exchanged uneasy glances while others sat frozen in silence. Nathan tilted his head. "This is the man calling my son violent." William's jaw clenched. He had lost control of the narrative. Angela smiled. "The evidence is clear. Logan started the fight. Elijah defended himself. Any punishment against Elijah would be a miscarriage of justice." The board president sighed. "The board sees no reason to pursue disciplinary action against Elijah Hayes." Elijah exhaled, relief washing over him, but the president wasn't done. He turned to Logan. "However, Logan Whitaker will be placed on probationary suspension. Further misconduct will result in expulsion." William's face hardened. He had walked into this room expecting to crush Elijah. Instead, his own son was facing consequences. Nathan stood, smirking. "I think that settles it." As Elijah walked out, he stole one last glance at Logan, no longer a powerful bully, but just a humiliated boy. For the first time, Elijah had truly won. The air was thick with tension as Nathan and Elijah pulled into the abandoned lot just outside Brooksville, Texas. The glow of the streetlights barely reached this far, leaving the area cloaked in eerie darkness. Nathan had known this was coming. Men like William Whitaker didn't accept defeat. Elijah glanced at his father, his pulse steady but his hands clenched into fists. "You sure about this?" Nathan exhaled slowly, his expression calm. "I've been sure since the day that man knocked on our door." As if on cue, headlights cut through the night. A black SUV rumbled into the lot, followed by two other vehicles. Their engines died, and William Whitaker stepped out first. He wasn't alone. 3 men followed him, bigger, older, the kind who looked like they had seen their fair share of dirty work. William stopped a few feet away, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. "You think this is over?" he spat. "You humiliated me, my son, my family. You think I'm just going to let that go?" Nathan didn't flinch. "You've already lost, Whitaker. Walk away." William sneered. "No, Carter, I think I'll take something from you instead." He motioned to his men. They moved fast, but Nathan and Elijah were faster. The fight begins. The first man lunged at Nathan. A rookie mistake. Nathan sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and twisted hard. A sickening crack filled the air as the man collapsed, screaming. Elijah didn't hesitate. When a second man rushed him, he ducked low, remembering his father's training. Use their momentum against them. He pivoted, sweeping the man's legs out from under him. The thug hit the ground hard, gasping as Elijah landed a precise strike to his ribs. The third man threw a wild punch at Nathan. Too slow. Nathan caught it midair, driving his fist into the man's gut before flipping him onto the gravel. That left William. Breathing hard, his fury turned to fear as he stared at the wreckage of his failed ambush. And then Elijah lifted his phone, letting the screen glow in the darkness. "Smile, Whitaker," he said, holding up the recording. "This is all on camera." William's face drained of color. He knew. If he retaliated, this footage would ruin him. Defeated, he turned and left, this time for good. Elijah and Nathan watched as his car disappeared into the night. It was finally over. The atmosphere at Westbridge High had changed. The whispers that once followed Elijah Hayes weren't about his humiliation anymore. They were about his victory. Logan Whitaker was gone, transferred to a private school across the state. His departure wasn't announced, but everyone knew the reason. The once untouchable bully had finally fallen, and he wasn't coming back. Elijah walked through the halls with his head high, no longer navigating the school like enemy territory. Instead, for the first time, people acknowledged him, not with pity but with respect. Lisa Carter and Derek Thompson, classmates who had once been distant, now waved him over during lunch. He wasn't just existing at this school anymore. He belonged. That night at dinner, Nathan Hayes watched his son closely. There was something different about him now, not just confidence but certainty, strength, a quiet resilience. Nathan set his fork down, studying Elijah for a moment before speaking. "You know," he said, "winning isn't about never losing." Elijah met his father's eyes. Nathan smirked. "It's about what you do after you fall." Elijah nodded slowly. He finally understood, and this was just the beginning.